Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing good. So today we're talking about the brand new V Rising update 1.110. And yeah, this one's a big one. It's not a flashy, massive content drop like a new biome or boss, but it's one of those updates that seriously changes how the game feels, especially if you're into PvP or late game optimization. It's the kind of patch that sneaks in under the radar, but ends up shaking the foundation of how people play. So if you've been running blood builds, min-maxing cooldowns, or trying to fine-tune your gear and spells, this is something you definitely need to pay attention to. Now, before we get too far, let's just call it what it is. This update is about balance, stability, and fairness. Stunlock Studios has clearly been listening to the community. Players have been talking about overpowered setups, unfair sustain loops, and those fights where one player just keeps spamming abilities like some kind of immortal blender. That's getting tuned down. The devs didn't want to completely gut any playstyles, but they definitely wanted to bring everyone closer together, make the PvP feel cleaner, and make sure PvE players aren't accidentally breaking the game's difficulty curve by stacking too many modifiers. So first off, the headline change. They've rebalanced the core stat caps. Spell cooldown rate, spell leech, and bonus spell power all got nerfed slightly, while weapon skill power actually went up a bit. Basically, the devs looked at how players were stacking certain traits and realized that mages or anyone leaning hard into spells were outpacing melee builds too easily. The cap for spell cooldown rate dropped to 30%, down from 35%. Spell leech dropped to 20% instead of 25%. Bonus spell power also maxes out at 30% now instead of 35%. Those numbers might sound small, but they're game-changing. It means that stacking jewels or gear purely to spam spells nonstop just doesn't pay off the same way anymore. On the flip side, weapon skill power got a nice bump. It's now capped at 45%, up from 40%. That subtle change gives weapon-focused players a bit more punch, especially in longer fights. So yeah, that whole spell spam meta is getting toned down, and melee users get a tiny boost to compensate. And honestly, that's a good call. If you've played enough V-Rising, you've definitely seen those moments where someone with crazy cooldown reduction and spell leech just never runs out of juice. You'd think you've got them, but then nope, they've got another Veil ready, another Blood Rage, another Shockwave. This new system limits that. Now you'll have to think about your timing, your positioning, and how you combo your abilities, not just rely on pure stat spam. But okay, let's talk about the blood types, because that's where a lot of people's builds live or die. Corrupted Blood got the biggest set of adjustments, and let's be honest, it needed them. In its old form, Corrupted Blood was a menace. That Shadow Explosion proc, especially when mixed with certain weapon abilities, could just melt people. It was chaotic in teamfights and brutal in duels. After this patch, it still has that flavor of being a dark, power-hungry blood type, but it's been reined in. The 90% bonus now only procs on spells, so no more triggering those explosions off weapon skills. And the proc chance has been reduced to 30%. Oh, and that part where the explosion would randomly break crowd control effects? Gone. You can actually land stuns or freezes now without the other person popping out because of a lucky shadow burst. At the 60% tier, the splash damage got a small buff to 125% instead of 100%. But again, it doesn't break CC, and attack speed dropped to 14% from 18%. It's still usable and still deadly in the right hands, but it's not that chaotic, uncontrollable mess it was before. Basically, Corrupted Blood now rewards precision and timing more than just button mashing. Then we've got Draculin and Scholar, both of which also got hit a little bit. Their spell power and leech were slightly reduced, and that was pretty much inevitable considering the overall cap changes. Draculin's crit cooldown reduction was toned down to 30% from 40%, so you can't just chain abilities and stay invincible forever. The devs didn't kill these blood types, they just made them play fair. If you loved them before, you can still make them work, but you'll need to actually think about how you build around them. Now, one of the more interesting non-combat updates comes in the form of admin tools. This might not matter to you if you're just playing solo, but if you run a server or host events, this is a big win. Stunlock added new commands that let admins temp ban or mute players. You can now use commands like ban character temp or ban user temp to remove someone for a set amount of time, or set player muted to shut down chat or voice for specific users. It's a small thing, but it adds a lot more control for community moderation. In the past, admins either had to permanently ban someone or just let them run wild, and that's not great. Now you can deal with problem players in a way that's fair and flexible. And while we're on quality of life improvements, there's another really nice tweak. Passive swapping during PvP buffs is now disabled. That means you can't cheese a fight by changing your passive mid-battle when you have the PvP buff. You're locked into what you chose before you went in, which just makes sense. It keeps the playing field consistent. They also turned off Waygate access during duels and arena matches. Again, logical. It prevents people from teleporting out of fights or trying to abuse fast travel mechanics in competitive settings. Now, if you're someone who likes reading patch notes word for word, you probably saw that the devs squashed a huge batch of bugs this time. Some of them were minor, like visual glitches or UI misreports, but others were seriously impactful. There was a long-standing issue where certain projectiles, like those from Carrion Swarm or curse attacks, could actually pierce through walls or structures. That's gone now. No more phantom hits from behind barriers. Another fix addressed Veil of Chaos and its next primary trigger, which could sometimes bug out under lag or when used with certain jewels. The team also fixed an exploit where Sword Shockwave could cast multiple projectiles without proper cooldowns, and that's no longer possible. And if you ever ran into a crash during character creation, yeah, that's been resolved too. It's one of those patches that feels like a bunch of small adjustments, but when you put them all together, the gameplay just feels cleaner. Spells behave more predictably, hitboxes make more sense, and you're less likely to get smacked by invisible projectiles from across a wall. These little fixes matter more than people think because they tighten up the competitive flow and make fights feel skill-based again. One thing I really appreciate about this update is how Stunlock approached it. They didn't go for easy nerfs or lazy blanket changes. Instead, they analyzed player behavior. They looked at what people were abusing and what was actually making fights feel unfair or one-sided. Corrupted Blood wasn't broken because it did too much damage. It was broken because of how it interacted with CC and weapon skills. So they didn't just nerf its numbers into the ground. They redefined how it functions. That's the kind of design philosophy that makes updates like this worth talking about. And if you're wondering how all this shakes up the meta, well, it's definitely going to change what you see in PvP for the next few weeks. Spell-heavy builds won't disappear, but they'll lose some of that unstoppable tempo they had before. You'll start seeing more weapon-focused builds creeping back in. Sword users, reapers, axes, stuff that benefits from the increased weapon skill power cap. Expect to see more balanced duels instead of one-sided ability spam. PvE players might notice that some late-game boss fights feel a bit different too. You won't be able to sustain indefinitely with leech-heavy setups, so there's a touch more tension now. You'll have to play smart, manage your cooldowns, and use defensive spells with intention instead of just relying on raw sustain. It's subtle, but it makes the combat loop more satisfying. And let's not forget about the social angle. Those new admin tools, they're going to help keep servers healthier. Anyone who's managed a public or roleplay server knows how hard it can be to moderate without proper tools. With temp bans and mutes, you can actually handle issues fairly instead of instantly perma-banning someone. It makes community management smoother, and that's huge for the game's longevity. There's also something to be said about how Stunlock communicates these changes. They've really stepped up their patch note clarity. Every little line in this update feels deliberate, and they explain not just what they changed, but why. When you can read patch notes and actually understand the design intent behind them, it makes the whole player experience feel more transparent. It's not just we nerfed this because people complained, it's we adjusted this because it was breaking a specific system. Now you might be wondering if this update sets the stage for something bigger. Honestly, it kind of feels like it does. This patch cleans house. It fixes balance problems, stabilizes systems, and polishes gameplay interactions. That's usually what studios do before rolling out new features or expansions. So while there's no official announcement of what's next, don't be surprised if we start hearing whispers about new content or events soon. This feels like a prep patch, like they're setting the table for the next course. If you're a returning player and haven't logged in since the last major patch, this is a good time to come back. The game's smoother, fairer, and a little more competitive. It rewards skill and awareness again.